Chapter 3 The Public Defender. Frank first met his public defender in mid-September of 1996. She told him that the government was going to make a big case against him. He told her his side of the story. She responded by saying, "You act like you didn't do anything wrong. Remember, you broke the law, and there is a law for everything. Even though what you did wasn't a violent crime, you still could do time based on how much they say you owe." Frank asked her, "How is my sentence going to be determined?" She told him that they use the sentencing guidelines. For example, if you owe over $200,000, you could serve 12 to 18 months in prison. She asked Frank, "How much do you think you owe?" Frank said, "Around $50,000. She told him, "It's not what you say you owe, it's what the government says you owe, no matter what." Frank then told her that they have to prove it. His public defender then told him that they are going to use the evidence that they confiscated from your home. She then said to Frank that she will be working closely with the federal authorities on his case. Frank heard enough, so he left her office and went home. During the next few months, he didn't hear anything from his public defender. She finally called him in mid-January of 1997 to meet with her and the postal inspector at the postal headquarters to go over the fraud loss statement. At this meeting, the postal inspector told Frank that he owed $233,000. Frank told him that this total has to be wrong. The postal inspector told Frank that this total is only wrong if you didn't use false information to get the credit, and that erroneous items can be removed if you can prove it. Then the public defender chimed in and told Frank that errors are going to be hard to prove, and that she was going to go over the fraud loss totals and would let him know if she found any discrepancies, and also told him that she made an appointment with a psychiatrist for him to get an evaluation. Frank went to see this shrink in mid-February of 1997. After a 2.5-hour talk with this doctor, he told Frank that he wanted to see him again to take a true and false test. A couple months had passed, and Frank's public defender called him to meet in her office to go over the paperwork. At this meeting, Frank asked her about the doctor's evaluation, and she said that she didn't get that yet and changed the subject. She then asked Frank, "How do you want to plead?" Frank said, "Not guilty." She told Frank, "If you do that, you will piss off the Assistant United States District Attorney, and he will throw the book at you." Frank asked her, "What do you mean by that?" She said that he will card in all the evidence, bring in witnesses, and even bring in the custodian from one of the banks involved in your case to testify against you. So Frank decided to sign the guilty plea and left and went home. After a month later, the public defender called Frank and told him to bring his financial statements to her for the probation department. Frank went to her office and gave her the requested information, and he asked her how was his case going. She told him not too good. Frank asked her why. She said that we have to get the amount you owe lower. Frank told her that there were 4 items on the list twice. She looked at her copy of the list and made corrections. and told Frank that this was only going to get the amount from $233,000 down to $211,000. Then he asked her, does the statute of limitations apply to my case? And she said no. Frank then told her that he felt like he was being railroaded by the government to cover up their botched search and seizure of his home. She told him, if you feel that way, you can always go back and contest the facts. And remember, the government didn't make up the totals. They got the information from the files that they confiscated from your home. Frank left her office and went home. He didn't hear anything for about 3 months. And then he received an arraignment notice to appear in mid-July of 1997. He took a drug test and went to the court to be arraigned. The following individuals were present in the courtroom, including the judge, the U.S. Assistant District Attorney, the Postal Inspector, the probation officer, and his public defender. Frank stood before the judge and told the judge that he understood everything. He was released on $10,000 bail and instructed to report to the probation department every Thursday by phone between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. Frank's sentencing date was set for mid-October of 1997. His public defender called Frank and told him that she was going to use the doctor's report as a defense in his case, and then he has gotten over the compulsive behavior that he was diagnosed with. Next, Frank received a notice changing his court date from mid-October of 1997 to the end of October of 1997. After all of these months, Frank was finally going to have his day in court. The following remarks is the way Frank felt about the court proceedings. Everything that Frank said was ignored because he wasn't a prominent person. He was a big nobody, and they could say and do anything to him they wanted to, and he couldn't do anything about it. The probation department recommended a downward departure in Frank's case because he was working, paying his restitution, and paying his household bills on time, and also because that I depended on him. The doctor in his report to the court stated that he was impressed at Frank's outlook on life and the way he channeled his compulsive behavior to improve his situation. The court didn't look at his experience, character, hardship, and responsibilities. They looked at a non-violent crime as if it was a violent crime, because the U.S. Assistant District Attorney hired 2 witnesses to testify that Frank did harm to them by ruining their credit. The United States Assistant District Attorney also said that home confinement was not enough punishment for Frank, because he's already serving that, because all he does is stay home with me, looking at videos, and we don't go anywhere. The following comments made by the judge before sentencing really upset Frank, but he kept his mouth shut. The judge asked him, "What do you have to say about yourself?" He stepped forward and told the judge that he never intended to harm anyone by his actions, and he used the credit for the things that we needed. He also told the judge that he was paying the bills that he incurred in a timely fashion. The judge looked at Frank with disdain and said, "Is that all you have to say?" The judge retired to her chambers and returned in a few minutes with her verdict. Before she read the verdict, she read Frank the Riot Act. She said that he used other people's money to live on, and you did harm 2 innocent people that you didn't even know. The judge mentioned me by saying that I could get someone else to take Frank's place, and if I needed help to move, the court would find me a place. The next remark really ticked me off when she said that I was just as bad as Frank because I shared with him all the things that he bought with other people's money. I am glad that I wasn't in the court, because I would have given this hanging judge a piece of my mind. Finally, the judge sentenced Frank to 12 to 14 months based on the sentencing guidelines. When Frank left the courtroom, he asked the public defender, why did the United States Assistant District Attorney bring in witnesses? The public defender told Frank that he knew he could get away with it, and that Frank pissed off the judge, and that's why she didn't show any mercy. So when Frank got home, he told me what had happened, and that's what I wrote here. Frank decided to get his own lawyer to make sure that he gets the fair treatment that he deserves.